What is up, everyone? My name is Olivia. You are currently watching or listening to the Orange Blossom Special Show. This is a show dedicated to ones we've lost, humor, grief, and everything in the in-between. We just wanted to take time to say thank you for listening wherever you are at. If you would like to hear more, make sure you hit that follow or that subscribe button, and we will get you updated for more episodes to come. But with that, let's get started with today's episode. Today's episode is going to be a background episode, more into who I am, why is this the name of my show, and giving a little jits, into who my dad was, which is why we're starting this podcast mainly, is to help keep his spirit alive, keep on rocking and rolling, live laughing and loving. And if you are wondering, man, how did you come up with such a unique name for a podcast? Let me tell you. So my dad had an SS Camaro. It was orange and it had black racing stripes that he had put on. And I believe it's the rocker panel part of the car. He had Orange Blossom Special put on. So his car was known around town as the Orange Blossom Special. And Orange Blossom Special, the name of it was a Johnny Cash song, which was named after a train called the Orange Blossom Special. And my dad, he was definitely a music fiend, so he definitely had to have known about that Johnny Cash song. He also was very into cars, trains, different things like that. So that is how we got the name for this podcast. I have been wanting to start a podcast for a very long time. I once upon a time had a YouTube channel, but now we are rebranding, rebooting things. And I've been trying to, think of a name to come up for it, but I was like, I have to name my podcast after this. Being down here in Florida, I think it definitely makes sense for sure as to why I am naming this podcast this. Getting to the basis of why I started this podcast. So I'm a yapper. My dad was a yapper through and through. And almost a year ago, my dad, I guess you could say unexpectedly, but kind of expectedly, passed away. And I'm just salty at him because he couldn't have waited 6 months to make it to my graduation. So thank you, Dad. But one of the reasons why I moved to Florida is because I wanted to spend more time and stuff with him. And I'm very, very thankful that I made that decision and I made the jump. Getting into my dad, my dad was a retired chiropractor. He was by far, I think, one of the funniest people I know. He created a miniature girl version of himself in me, for sure. My dad he was like an extroverted introvert, but my dad knew how to I guess you could say he knew how to put on a show around people. He was definitely very charismatic. My dad would go to bars in Tampa and get more numbers than I think I ever have, because especially down here, there was just something that just made people flock to him, and it was really funny. But I think part of that is that he gave no shit. He did not care. And he, as long as you were a nice person or, not a jerk, he would become your best friend. And he would talk to anyone like me, like he could talk to a wall, which is why I'm talking to a podcast. But if there's anything he just taught me, it's to treat everyone the same. You in life never know who you're going to talk to. And if you have your nose up at people, there are so many opportunities that you may end up missing out on because you want to let your own personal ego get in the way. And my friends tell me like, hey, sometimes you're a little too humble and you need to be able to like tell people about projects and things that you're doing. But for me, I think I have always tried to be someone to live like as humble of a life as I can, and to boast about things, but like also not to boast about things. I don't know if it's like imposter syndrome or if it's because I've just been around a bunch of people who have been really talented, really successful, and I like wasn't to their level yet in the sense of like what I have achieved. And so I just kind of felt like I was in a backseat role, and I'm perfectly fine with that. For me, as much as I like talking to cameras, I very much prefer to be behind them. I absolutely love the production side to things. I think some of my friends can tell you, it's like, I love it. It's so much fun. I love getting to see like how things get put together in the background before they come to light. And to me, I think that's very much how I have tried to live my life, is that we see often social media is so curated and it's so fabricated. And I think because of that, we have gotten to this point in our society where people think that they have to put on a front in front of others. You have to put on a filter when you go to be around people, because you don't necessarily know how someone may react to your true self. But I think it's just important to recognize, especially since I did get my master's in marketing, I think it's especially important to realize like how much of our life, how many things around us are actually fabricated, from social media ad posts to influencer posts to what people choose to show of themselves online. With everything that's fabricated and filtered, I often find that people end up comparing a real, authentic side of themselves to something that someone has posted, and to filters and things that are not real. And I think that's one of the main reasons why we are in a huge mental health crisis right now in our country, is because we have gotten to this point where everyone wants to compare. It's like keeping up with the Joneses, and then today's society said, literally hold my beer. Because we are so often focused on like the next thing, having this next trend, having this, having that. And I think we have gotten to a point where we are generally forgetting to take advantage of the small, beautiful moments that are in our lives, and we're missing out on them because we want to pay attention to the other person across the street whose grass is greener than ours, when 9 times out of 10, it may not even be real grass. It could be turf grass, and you're mad that your real grass isn't as green as theirs. It's because it's fake. It's literally because it's fake. And my dad, I think, did a really good job at growing up. My parents were chiropractors. They ran their own offices and stuff. And I can tell you, from growing up, from seeing how he interacts with us at home to seeing how he interacts with his friends, that he really did not that man had no filter. My dad was one of those people who, there are certain people who, I understand we want to be real and authentic, but sometimes your thoughts may need to go through like a filter. And my dad did not do that at all. So my dad did and didn't have a filter. Okay. So from a doctor standpoint, like, he knew that there were certain people who needed to see a doctor that was more dressed up. And there were certain people who didn't care. And I think one thing, when you're trying to be humble and you want to be real and you want to be authentic to yourself, I think it's important. But I also think it's important to recognize the audience that you're talking to, because like something that you do in one room can get you crucified in another. And part of, especially like moving to the South, that I'm finding is like culture norms here in New York are very, very different in certain situations and in certain avenues. I think as far as like the way that my dad lived his life, it was very real, true, and authentic. And he was not about social media at all. So, you know, I wasn't smart enough. I don't say I wasn't smart enough. I knew that science was not my calling in life. Medicine was not my calling in life, and that's okay. I love business. I love marketing. I wouldn't have gone and gotten my master's if I wasn't somewhat interested in marketing. But I just think it's funny that like I'm doing all this stuff on social media. My dad hated it. But at the same time, I think it's important to be around people who do not live their lives on the internet, because they help bring you down from earth and help you realize that everything is fake. It's okay. Again, like my dad never treated anyone differently based off of what they did or who they were. He was like the funniest person in the room by far. Definitely get my humor from him. He definitely gave me my work ethic for sure. Me and my therapist, this is our weekly argument, is that she tells me I'm doing too much and I tell her I am not doing nearly enough. I'm like, hustle, grind, lock in, like work hard, play hard. And she's like, but that's not always healthy. And she yelled at me, and then my other friend went and yelled at me, and they said, you can have the work till you're dead mentality, but then look what happens. You may end up passing away earlier than you anticipated, because maybe if you took a step back, or people took a step back a little bit in their early 20s and 30s, they would have more endurance for their 40s and 50s and 60s. And I said, you know what? You may actually be right about that. And I think that's one thing that I'm having to look and reevaluate in my personal life. It's just, you want to have longevity in things. And that's also the thing too with like starting projects and everything that I'm doing now. It's like, I think it's so hard for us to not see instant success, but you have to know that there's a process and there's a plan, and keep showing up. The message that needs to get sent to a lot of parents and kids out there, which is, if you fail to prepare to fail. Your lack of preparement does not dictate a crisis for those around you. And I can tell you that as someone who worked in customer service for a really long time, is that there are people who do not prepare things, who are like, oh, we're just going to decide that, you know, we want to go on a 10-day vacation today. Not thinking about the fact that, you know, it's busy season and everyone else is traveling, and then throw a fit and throw a tantrum for everyone else because they didn't want to prepare things. And guess what? That's your fault. That is your fault. If you do not prepare, it is your fault. Like, I am not someone who like has to have every single minute of their life detailed out, but I need to have like a runway, like an idea of kind of what we're doing. But there are some people who just go into life with vibes, and I don't know how you guys do it. Couldn't be me. And being down in Florida, I'm learning that sometimes you just have to learn to go with the vibes and just trust it, because that's sometimes when you end up having the best days. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of give everyone like a quick introduction, to who I am. Like starting this podcast, I've been having conversations with some friends about starting it, the idea and things behind it. And if there's one thing that I've realized is that, I'm all jokes and everything, but grief is really tough sometimes. And it's one of those things where you can just have a bad day out of the blue and you just have to learn to work around it. This is what I was thinking about, like with grief and things like that. Is grief, and I feel like grief and trust almost kind of go like hand in hand with certain things, like once something's been broken. Because there's going to be grief if you like break trust, because you can never get back to what you had before. And I was thinking about the fact that like scars and like broken mirrors, like once they're pieced together, they're proof that like something has happened and that one thing is going to be left with the mark and it's never going to be the same as it was before. And it's a daily reminder. And sometimes like a scar, like Harry Potter, like sometimes a scar might cause you pain. Sometimes like, you can cut your finger on a piece of broken glass that's been glued to a mirror. And it's proof that like you have changed. And I think with grief and with the grief process, one thing that I have learned is that you have to learn to grieve what you had before and what you would have had in order to help yourself like start to move on. And one of the humbling things for me is having to recognize and realize that like I can never go back to that person that I was before my dad passed away, because I was that person because I had my dad around and now I don't. And I have to learn to give myself grace and acceptance for acknowledging that like I am now almost a new person in that. And there are people who knew the old me and knew the new me. And there are people who are only going to know the new me and know this version of myself. And that's perfectly fine. But I can't compare the two. Like you can't compare 2024 to like 1924, because they're two different timelines. And you can't jump back and forth between the two as much as I think we would wish that we could. And I think that with being open and honest and transparent about the things that I've gone through, I have realized that there are also a lot of people who have gone through similar situations. And there's parents who have lost kids. There's kids who have lost parents. And in a weird way, I think we end up like finding each other. And neither of us are going to be able to like repair that wound in our heart for that person that we lost, because there's always going to be that emptiness. It's like you literally lose a piece of you and nothing you can do is ever going to bring that piece back. But I think it is important to be able to be real and authentic and honest with each other, and to talk about things that we're going through, and to recognize that, you know what, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay if you're having a bad day. Your feelings are valid, like your emotions are valid. And eventually we end up, I don't say like moving on, but like you end up finding ways to cope and deal. And I wanted this podcast to be a place where people could talk about, losing loved parents and the struggles in life that we have gone through. And if there's anything that, maybe, or resources that like you have had, maybe it could help someone else. Ultimately, I just like want to be able to build a community of people who have gone through these things, and just also people who find the humor. I'm a dark humor person too. It's how I deal with things. Live, laugh, love. And I think that's okay, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But this is why I'm starting the podcast. If you have anything you want me to talk about, let me know. Make sure you hit that follow button or that subscribe button wherever you're watching from. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen to me chat. And as my dad always, there's two things you can't leave the house without doing in the morning, and that's having your morning coffee and taking your morning shit. Thank you. Have a good one.